I'm going to be talking about some work I've done with Dr. Bodwin on a project called Flourish. So, quick intro about me and a quick outline. So, I'm a final year stats student at Cal Poly. I study stats and data science. I'm interested in R. I'm interested in Bayesian methods, computational stats, and so on. And broadly, this talk can be split into two parts. One, we're kind of introducing Flourish and talking about its features, and a little bit at the end where we talk about Quarto extensions on a whole and how we built Flourish. If you want more details on that second part, feel free to talk to us or look at some of the slides later. So sorry, I forgot to mention as well, that's where you can follow along if you'd like at that short link. So Flourish is related to Flair, which is a R package that some of you may have looked at before. It was used R obviously, and it highlighted text in R Markdown documents, but this wouldn't work with Quarto due to how Flair was built. So we had to rebuild it from scratch, and that's kind of the main motivation. So Flourish is a Quarto extension, and it allows users to dynamically style text in code chunks. So you can highlight things, underline, yada. We'll get into that in a little bit. So again, it's like Flair, but now you use it in Quarto, so you can target any language. So installation is pretty simple. You can find this in the README as well, but here's some instructions. It's just like every other Quarto extension if you're familiar. And so here, getting into more of what Flourish can do, you can see we specify some stuff in a YAML just in a for a code chunk. We're saying Flourish, and we want to target print, and Flourish goes and finds that little print bit and highlights it in yellow, which is the default styling. The other thing we can do is we can target text using regex or the other basic thing. And so here, if we want to highlight all numbers or any amount of numbers, we can get that pretty easily. But Flourish is a lot broader than that. Flourish can target any HTML output. So right now I have reveal slides, right, and that works, and normal HTML, so whatever you say format and HTML, those both work perfectly, and other things, but we haven't really tested anything. And more interestingly, perhaps we can style the matches with any CSS. So here is a little gold from the Flourish hex, which I have later, so come after the talk. And we made the font bold as well. But it's any CSS, or almost any. So when making this talk, I realized this, and I decided to use LLMs, and this is probably the best thing that I found LLMs to do so far. Write some weird stuff, which you can do because we support all of this. The only thing I found, I tried to get some of this to rotate or like blink or anything. We can't do animations apparently, but I think this is worth it. I don't even know what's going on here. So a bit more practically, just slightly, you can flourish any language, right? It's Quarto, so we're just using code chunks. Here we can do Python, yippee. We can also do Julia. A bit more interesting here, Julia supports Unicode variable names and such, and Flourish handles that beautifully. Nothing, it doesn't matter. You hear alpha, beta, pi, they all get highlighted normally. But you can also, when making these slides, I realized that YAML itself is also a language, so you can flourish the YAML that tells you how to flourish. And so this might be useful if you're introducing Flourish to people, like I'm doing now. So that's that. And another interesting thing that we can do is we can hide code. So if we want to, let's say if you're teaching and you wanted to bring attention to the function or make students try to think about what kind of function would go here, you can specify mask true, and that shows that kind of deletes the text. It replaces with spaces. So even if you have a clever student who tries to highlight it, you won't see anything there. And here you can underline it so that you know that there's something there still. So here we have some data, or we're generating some data. It's exponential distribution, rate of 1/10. What kind of function would get you somewhere around 10 mean? So here's a comprehensive example. If you want one slide to look at to kind of tell you how to use Flourish, this would be it. Again, the slides are posted, and you can see some of this in the GitHub repo. So there are a lot of things that we want to do that we haven't done yet, and some of those are related to something like this. This seems like it'd be a common pairing. I don't see much point in masking because it's just blank without underlining or stuff like that, and we would like to provide shortcuts for those kind of common tasks. It'd also be nice to specify the number of matches to flourish. So let's say here you wanted to target, let's say you wanted to target 0. There are 2 zeros in this code chunk. If you wanted to highlight just the first 0 or just the second 0, you can't do that as of now. So specifying the number of matches or targeting specific ranges of chunks would be nice. Also document level YAML. So if I wanted to keep these monstrosities on multiple code chunks, I would have to copy this whole thing every single time, which is a bit of a pain. And that also dovetails nicely into the other thing that we want to focus on is allowing custom classes. So if you know enough CSS to write a class, maybe you can just insert that instead of having Flourish parse through some of that. Maybe they'll get animations as well. I don't know. Stay tuned. We'd also like to target code output and plain text, but right now, as you can see, everything's on the code check itself, but it would be nice maybe to be able to highlight some of the output. There's some bugs, mostly related to sanitation or sanitizing stuff, because HTML and regex are a bit annoying like that. PRs are welcome. You can fix all of this for us, or we'll get AI to do it. Some things that we won't do probably are target PDF or docx. Output docx is weird. MS Word is we're not going to touch that. PDFs, maybe if we're using typest or typist, whatever it is, TYPSD. I like it a lot, but I think maybe we can look at that. But again, later thing, you could do it and you could submit a PR and we'd gladly take it. The other thing is we want to style non-text output. Perhaps we won't style non-text output even if you want to, like if you wanted to highlight the title in a ggplot or in some image. But again, when writing these slides, I was thinking about something, and maybe if you put SVGs are basically just text. If you embed that into a document, maybe you could do that. I'm not doing it though. So moving on to the technicalities, that was a lot faster than expected. Uh, a brief introduction maybe to Quarto extension and filters. I'm not an expert in this, but as Dr. Bottom and I have worked on this, we've learned a bit about how Quarto works basically. And so Quarto extensions broadly just add functionality to Quarto. And I found this nice document with this blog post by this grad student who kind of classified different kinds of Quarto extensions. And so the first two are kind of like templates, and then the last one are extending Quarto in different ways, changing behavior. And so our Flourish is a filter, though there are, again, other ways. I'm sure you've used shortcodes if you tried to add font awesome icons or things like that. So filters in the rendering pipeline. So this is a kind of rendering, this might be slightly outdated, but this is a rendering pipeline for Quarto. You get your clear text input, so that's your QMD, and then it gets read by Quarto and it gets translated into abstract syntax tree, AST, and then the AST gets parsed and it gets modified, and it writes to another AST, and then at the very end you get this writer bit which goes from your abstract style or your abstract version of the document to a physical thing like a PDF or a docx or HTML or whatever. So lots of things are filters. Quarto essentially is an orchestrator around pandoc, if you weren't familiar. And so pandoc citations, Quarto crossrefs, and there are a bunch of other things you could find. These are just a couple examples. So Flourish itself is written almost entirely in JavaScript. Quarto extensions in general are written typically in Lua or JavaScript if you want them to be portable. So as mentioned before, Flair was written in R, which meant that that was like a dependency, whereas with Java, if you're writing an extension in JavaScript or Lua, it works on any device which has Quarto, so that's nice. Um, Flourish hooks into the document load to inject our flourishes into the rendered document. So what that means is that when, like, let's say this file itself, this is just an HTML file, and if you go and look at the source, you won't find any of the flourishes, but when you open it properly, you will, flourish will kind of get run. And so there's some fancy JavaScript that'll go and, that checks essentially for a document load, and then it injects our flourish stuff. So that's how you get all of these, well, I won't go back, but all of the highlighting and all of the other stuff. And one thing that when we were making this that we need to be aware of was to make sure that we keep all of the Quarto niceties. So again, Quarto does a lot of cool stuff from here to here. And again, we're hooking in right here. So it could be possible that we don't maintain some of this. So if we wanted to, when writing Flourish, we had to keep in our mind that we wanted to still maintain the idea that functions are colored differently and numbers and variables, all of that syntax highlighting that Quarto does. Flourish can't break any of that, so that was one thing that we had to keep in mind. The other big thing is that, as you can tell, Flourish relies on hash pipes, just like a lot of built-in Quarto stuff. And parsing of the hash pipes was interesting. That was something we had to do in JavaScript, and we parsed it into a dictionary, and then that had all of our information. So maybe it's worth coming back. We'd have a sort of array of what kind of target is it. So is it normal, or is it like a fixed match, or is it regex? And are there any styles that the user specified? Did they want to mask anything? And now once we process this YAML, which is basically just a dictionary, into our in the JavaScript, we get something back, and we build a regex expression from that, and we use that. So Quarto has lots of extensions. They're written in Lua or JavaScript again for portability, so that it works on any device with Quarto. Both Dr. Bodwin and I aren't super familiar with Lua or JavaScript, but LLMs are very familiar with JavaScript at the very least, and that helped a lot in some of our process. So we wrote some of I will we wrote some of the JavaScript in Lua, but most of the time an LLM took care of it, and a lot of the time we just let the LLM go loose. But that didn't work all the time, and so sometimes we had to deal with the painstaking endeavor that Dr. Bodwin did, which was write something in R so we know the logic, and then get the LLM to translate it. As Hadley keeps mentioning, LLMs tend to be pretty good at translating. So writing extensions is pretty simple once you have an idea about what you want to do. So the hardest part here was like designing this or designing this interface, how flourishes should work, where are they in the rendering pipeline. All of these kinds of questions were a lot harder than actually going and writing the code, especially since we didn't write a lot of it, and LLMs took care of that. But this is, I mean, what I learned the most from this whole experience is that Quarto extensions are pretty easy, just like how Quarto itself is really nice to write in. Quarto extensions have a lot of tooling built up so that building an extension isn't too difficult. So that's that. I have a lot of time for questions, so I hope someone has something. I have extra content on how Flourish itself works, but I think it's a bit, maybe a touch boring. So unless someone asks that question, I won't go into it. But again, you can see it all on the slides, socials, website, and I have stickers if they're not out yet, but I can get stickers. Thank you.
Great, thank you.